This is the NFL Play Football Podcast, and I'm Jeff Fisher of High School Football America. NFL Play Football is the NFL's initiative to provide fun and engaging experience for players of all ages and skill levels. Learn more at playfootball.nfl.com. Well, in the history of high school football, there have only been two coaches to win 600 or more games. The late, great John McKissick from South Carolina leads the list at 621 victories, and right behind him, having won his 600th game this past Friday, is J.T. Curtis of John Curtis High School in Louisiana. And Coach Curtis is on the NFL Play Football Podcast hotline to talk about last Friday and his long career in the coaching profession. Thanks for joining us, Coach.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And, Coach, you've been asked a lot of times how it feels, how will it feel, how would it feel leading up to it and all that. My question is, you're at the school started by your dad, and you win 600 football games, and I just wanted to know if winning it at Dad's school makes it a little bit sweeter for you.
There's no doubt about that, because my father and my mother put their whole life into this. The last 30, 40 years of their life was just completely committed to the school and the growth of the school. My dad got introduced into education kind of by accident, honestly. He was working as a pioneer mission work in the 50s in Illinois, advancing the Southern Baptist work that had been gone that way. And I had an opportunity to teach in a school at a small town in Illinois called Wyanett, Illinois, and got introduced to education and absolutely fell in love with the opportunity to help young people, not only academically, but with their lives, with their moral and spiritual and ethical development. Even in a public school at that time, it was not an issue, and it's a shame that it is today, but it wasn't an issue at that point. So when he decided to go into the private school business, if you would, he wanted to have it an emphasis on Christianity, not denominationalism. And he wanted to emphasize relationship to God, moral and spiritual and ethical values that he thought would be the life-shaping events in the lives of young people, as well as their academic performance. And so when he started the school in '62, he coached for 3 or 4 of those years, and then I took it over in 1969, and we were in a middle of a little bit of a struggle as a school. We went 0-10, didn't win a game, scored 2 touchdowns, and I thought maybe insurance would be the way to go, because I was married and had a child on the way, and it was pretty hectic. But we stayed the course, and young guys responded to the off-season program, and I was so fortunate that I played for an excellent college coach at the University of Arkansas, and I learned so much at that university of how to prepare a team and off-season work, and so we implemented that and had a great season in 1970 and won our first state championship in '75 and have just continued to move forward since then.
J.T. Curtis on the line, won his 600th game last Friday. Coach, I talked to you about 10 years ago, and you brought up that 0-10. I'm not going to have you re-answer that question, but I'm going to ask you this question, which is, what was the big difference from 0-10 to the next season? How did you change as a coach, if at all?
I did. And I think in this business you do one of two things: you either grow or you go backwards. You either continue to try to learn day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, or you get stale. And one of the things that I knew even then was that we needed to be into an off-season program, and we needed to make sure that the players that were playing wanted to play football. They wanted to be a part of this team. It was not just something they did, but it was something that they made a commitment to. Mm-hmm. So we started our off-season weight program, our off-season running program, and to be honest with you, at that point in time, as a kind of side note, we didn't have a lot of weights. That was kind of a new thing in the late '60s. People really wasn't into weights, muscle bound, and you're gonna not be able to run fast and so forth and so on. And so when I got into the program, we didn't have very many weights. I said, you know what, I got to find a way to add weight to these bars. And so I went to the junkyard and I got some flywheels. You've seen those wheels that have the ridges all around them, and I weighed them on my scale at home, and they were 37.5 pounds or 25.5 pounds, and that's what we used. And the kids really bought into the lifting and into the program, and I think what it taught me is that young people really want three things. And I get this question all the time, man. How are kids different? How are kids? I really don't think they are different. I really think they want to know that you care about them. They want to know that you love them, and they want to know that you're willing to discipline them, and they want to know that you're willing to commit to them, to work with them. And I think those three things I learned in that year, because those guys really bought in. And again, in 1970, we made our first playoff appearance. We got beat in the first round by a good team, but we were there, and it kind of set the tone for the future.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Coach Curtis on the line, J.T. Curtis, John Curtis High School in Louisiana. Hey, Coach, you said Dad started as a coach, so obviously you got a chance to see his style a little bit. In hindsight now, some 50 years later, do you ever look back and go, I think I picked that up from Dad, or I'm like Dad this way, or I'm a little different from Dad in that way? Is there a little compare and contrast you can do for us?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. You learn from your mentors, and he was a guy that was passionately involved with whatever he did. If he was going to do it, he was going to work at it, and he was going to diligently work at it. And at that time in his life, I mean, he was wearing a bunch of hats now. I mean, he was doing a lot of things, and he never shortchanged it on the football field. And I think that's one of the things that I learned, that when you make a commitment to something, you make it to do the very best you can and to give it your very best effort. And he was certainly a guy that did that. And when it came time to a point when he realized he could not do that any longer because of his other responsibilities, he was willing to step aside, and that's how I got involved right out of college. Just as naive as I could be, but thinking I could conquer the world. And as you know, and as I have said, we didn't conquer it that first year for sure. But I learned so much from him in terms of working with young people and making a commitment. A quick story. The first day of practice, I came, and there were 6 guys showed up. Ooh. And I had 39 notebooks, all laid out and labeled John Curtis Christian Football and all of that business. So we went out and we ran a little bit, and then I let them go home, and I said, guys, come back this afternoon for 2-a-days. We were doing 2-a-day practice. And I walked to my dad's office, and I said, Dad, I only had 6 guys show up. And he had his head down at the desk, and he was doing some work he was doing, and he kind of looked up at me and he said, you better get on the phone and start calling, huh? And I realized right then what he was saying. This is yours. Mm-hmm. If you need me, okay, but you better go to work. This is not going to be easy. And again, threw myself into it because that's the way I saw him do things, and we ended up having about 27 guys on a team that year that I would pull out of the halls or made a call to see if they'd come play football. But from that point, we continued to build. And I realized, you know what, this is your responsibility. And you need to be on top of the things that are going to be involved in your program and make sure that you're getting things done the way they need to be done, and we've tried to do that and to improve on it from year to year.
The buck stopped with you, Coach J.T. Curtis, on the line with us on High School Football America and NFL Play Football. Hey, Coach, can you take us back to when the goose egg stayed in the win column and the losses were totaling up there toward 10? You remember any conversations with Dad about that? You remember the one about not enough kids? Any good advice, sage advice during that tough first year?
Well, I think the big thing, he thought that I was trying to do too much, mm-hmm. and he was right. He was right. He said, you need to pare down on what you're doing, and you need to get better at it. You're trying to do too much offensively. You're trying to ask these kids to do things that maybe they're not really capable of doing right now. You need to get good at something. And I really kind of bought into that. I really bought into realizing that it's not what I know, it's what I can teach and what they can perform. Mm-hmm. And that was a great lesson, a valuable lesson at that point in time. And look, I'm not going to sit there and tell you that it was something that hit me overnight. It was a growing process. You grow in. As I said, I think you either get a little better or you get a little worse or you get a little stale. And I think you got to continually be in this growing process and understanding your players and what they're capable of doing and making sure that you never, ever leave the fundamentals of the game. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that he always emphasized. And his terminology, it's all about blocking and tackling, son. It's all about blocking and tackling. And he's right. It's about blocking and tackling. When you lose a game, if you go back and look at it, it's because you probably didn't block real well or you probably missed tackles. And the fundamentals never change. And so that was a valuable experience that I learned and hopefully have continued to use and grow as the years have gone by.
Sure, it's a simple game when it comes right down to it. Hey, Coach, you also have the pleasure of working and coaching with your sons. So I was just curious, same sort of relationship you had with Dad in that occasion, or has it changed a little bit? Did you learn something saying, I want to do it this way versus what Dad did? Tell me a little bit about working with the kids.
Well, again, I mentioned to you that I think earlier in our conversation, my brothers, I have a brother and I have 3 sisters that are all involved in the school, and my 2 sons are. I have nephews and some nieces that are. But interestingly, none of us were ever influenced by our parent to go into education. None of us. And it was because my dad and my mom both felt that it was a calling. That if you're really going to be a teacher, if you're really going to do this job the way it should be done, you need to have a direction and a calling to be the kind of teacher and the kind of influence in young people's lives that you can be. And again, interestingly, I did the same thing with my 2 sons. Both of my boys were excellent high school players. Both of them played Division I college football. Both of them were opportunities to be under excellent coaches. And so when they came and joined the staff and became part of it, we opened ourselves up to new thinking, new ideas, but never left the fundamental processes. I remember my oldest son, Johnny, came in from college, and he was putting in the pro spread punt formation that they used in college. And we had never used that. We had always been a little more traditional front in the punt. And one of the coaches that had been with me for a period of time said, well, we'll try it, but you're going to have to prove it. You have to prove it's better than what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And did. And our coverage was better, and our protection was as good. And so I think that we always have been open to new ideas and new thinking, but we always have maintained that we're not going to change for change's sake. We're going to change because it is better. It's better than what we're doing. And the only way you can do that is to evaluate and look at new things and new ideas. And both of the boys, Jeff was a quarterback at Tulane and played for Tommy Bodden and was on the undefeated Tulane team that made history at Tulane and had a great insight and knowledge into the offensive part of the game. Played for Rich Rodriguez and his innovative offense at that point, and we were able to use some of the things that they did at Tulane implemented into our passing game. We didn't change in terms of changing all that we did. We just added to and tried to improve. And my sons and my nephews that have all had a chance to play at the collegiate level have always made those kind of contributions.
Coach J.T. Curtis on the line here talking about his 600th career win. Actually, we're kind of building around that. You've probably been asked all the questions ad infinitum about that 600th win, so we're trying to keep it a little bit different from that. And I was never going to ask you the question about how the kids have changed because I agree with you. There's nuance to it, but it's kind of the same. What about the coaches out there, the coaching profession? You talked a little bit about weights and all that. Where are the biggest changes you see in the profession of coaching?
I'm sad to say this. I think some of the guys are getting into coaching without a commitment to being a real coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I really am sad to say that. Because you have a clipboard and a whistle around your neck, it doesn't mean you're a coach. I mean, I know guys that unfortunately in other places I've heard don't want to work on the weekends, don't want to scout on the weekends, and don't want to spend the extra time that is necessary to be successful. And how I look at that is that you're not hurting yourself, you're cheating the players, you're cheating the kids. They deserve every opportunity, in my opinion, to be successful. And if you're going to coach, then you need to make a commitment and have an understanding that it is time consuming. You don't get paid by the hour in coaching. If you did, it would be in nickels and dimes. And you do it because you love what you're doing, and you get pleasure and you get enjoyment, and I believe you get a fulfillment internally, intrinsically, in terms of watching young people progress, watching them grow in the sport, watching them become better young men and become better players, and to learn what it means to be committed, because they see you committed. Mm-hmm. And they see you as the example that they need to follow. Those intrinsic values, I think, are why we play ball. I don't say this very often because sometimes people misunderstand it, but if the only thing we gain at the end of the day is a score, somebody won, somebody lost on a scoreboard, in my opinion, it's not worth the energy, the effort, the time, the money that has to go into athletics. There has to be, in my opinion, intrinsic value of the things that we've just talked about. Commitment, hard work, dedication, teamwork, self-sacrifice, those things that are going to make these young men successful community leaders, successful dads, successful business people. That's the intrinsic values that sport should bring to each and every individual person. And I think that's so important. And when I see coaches that really are not willing to do that, they're really looking for the supplement rather than the reward of the intrinsic value, it really kind of bothers me. But there's still a lot of good guys that are doing it the right way, and I want to emphasize that. But I think some of the younger people, maybe over the course of the last 15 or 20 years, have maybe got into coaching for the wrong reason. They look for the reward rather than the financial reward rather than the values that we just talked about.
No, I agree. I've been around this sport for 45 years. Well, actually a little bit longer as a player, I guess. But, I agree 100% with you. And there's a lot of people in your corner agreeing with that, too. Coach JT Curtis on the line here. A couple more, Coach. Thank you for the time. This one, has to do with an interview I did with you and Coach McKissick, John McKissick, the guy you're chasing for the all-time leader. He had 621 wins. And I'm just curious, when you get your name, mentioned in there with the late, great John McKissick, I'm just wondering what that means to you. I know that day when we spoke 10 years ago, you had many kind things to say. But now, 10 years later, what does it mean to be mentioned in the same breath with Coach McKissick?
Well, it hasn't changed in my evaluation of Coach McKissick. What he did was unbelievable. And again, what a community leader he was. What a guy that made an impact in the community that he served and the young people he served. And to be in that number is certainly an honor. And I'm sure Coach McKissick felt the same way I do, that there's so many people that deserve the same recognition and have made such an impact on the players, the assistant coaches, the trainers, people that have really helped make this possible. And it's humbling to be in that number, and it's humbling to recognize how many people have sacrificed so that you could be in that position. And to be mentioned with a guy like John McKissick is not only humbling but an honor to be in that number.
I've done 45 years worth of interviews. That's still my favorite one. Coach, to wrap up with, I won't do the obvious question that I'm sure you get way too many times, and people, I'm not even going to say it. You can guess at what the question he gets a lot of times after all these years. But my question would be this. You've got 600 wins. You've got 72 losses, 62 of them coming after the 0-10. Most coaches that win a lot of games, they're wins, right? But most of them stick, those losses in their crawl, right? They stay there for a while. Any of those 72 stick in that crawl of yours?
Well, there's no question about that. And you know why? Because we learn so much more from our losses if we're really serious about our business. One of the things that I try to do, I try to take a couple of games a year that we have won, especially if we got a really good team and we're playing really well. I try to go back and look at that film and look at it as though we had lost the game. Because it gives you a different perspective. Little things become big things in losses that sometimes when you win, you have a tendency to gloss over. You might mention them, but you really don't emphasize them the way you should. And I think the losses that we've had have been motivators for us to be better coaches in terms of improving or finding a way to improve it. And I think that's one of the keys to coaching is that you've got to identify problems. You've got to identify what is the difficulty that we're going through, what is the problem that we're having, and then find a solution for it. Find a drill or a technique or an idea that'll help solve that problem. And when you have losses that are really devastating to you, whether it be in season or whether it be in a playoff or a championship, I think you grow from those. The other thing I've learned to do through the years is to sometimes you just got to tip your hat to the other guy. Yep. Sometimes he's got a better team than you got. And the thing that I've evaluated at that point was our effort and our energy and our commitment what it needed to be. And if it is, then we're gonna evaluate that and we're gonna tip our hat. And we're gonna move on to the next opportunity. And that's the way I feel about 600. The next and most important game of the season is this Friday night against Jesuit High School, who has an excellent team. And you got to move on past great victories, and you got to move on past devastating defeats and learn from both if it's at all possible.
Coach, thank you so much for taking the time. I know this has been a busy week for you. You found some time, and I just really, really appreciate that. But more importantly, I just want to congratulate you, not so much on the 600th win, but what you've done for the student athletes, your fellow coaches there, the school, and therefore the community. Hell of a job, Coach, and congratulations, and thank you for taking the time to join me.
Jeff, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I wish you the best, and we're going to keep moving forward. Thank you for the opportunity.
And that's the NFL Play Football Podcast, the NFL's initiative to provide fun and engaging experience for players of all ages and skill levels. Hey, coaches, don't forget to check out playfootball.nfl.com for some great coaching resources to help you improve in the profession. I'm Jeff Fisher of High School Football America, and you've been listening to the NFL Play Football Podcast.